I'm very happy to have Mark Lee Hunter here. I was at a kind of conference and I was listening to him speak about the topic of story-based inquiry. And I actually had never heard about it. Have any of you heard about the method of story-based inquiry?
Which means that none of you Googled me, right?
You should have reported before you go.
Hang on, just first lesson in investigative journalism. All journalism is about power. All journalism is about power, okay? And when you walk into the room, the only power you have is whether you know more about the other person than they know about you. Okay? Please remember that. Okay.
So does anybody here know anything about Mark? Has anybody? You can show off now. Has anybody Googled him? Yeah, okay. So there's a very good lesson in that, but we'll forgive you this time, but never again. I didn't know anything about story-based inquiry, and so I signed up to hear about it. And it was funny because during his presentation, he actually quoted Professor Maraldi, and then I went and spoke to him after, saying, oh, that was my professor, and then sort of introduced them, and then thought, oh, that would be nice to have them here at the same time. They're sort of in the same business in different ways and different approaches. And I was also very interested in Mark's international background. So he comes from America, but he's lived in Paris since 1982. He runs INSEAD, the Center for...
At INSEAD, it's the Social Innovation Center.
Sorry, the Social Innovation Center. He gives lessons in journalism, and he works with different partners on story-based inquiry, a method that hopefully you can learn yourselves and use to find your own stories and investigate your own stories. So I will let him explain the rest. He is the expert. Okay. Please give a warm welcome to Mark Lee Hunter.
Okay. Okay. Look, before I get into this, I want to tell you something because I know you're all worried about this, okay? Every time I ever speak about investigative journalism and listening to my colleagues speak, I heard everybody saying, can you make a living at this? Do you make enemies? Is it dangerous? Okay, I want you to know something. I went to Paris at the age of 30. I didn't know anyone. I had no money in my pocket, okay? I didn't have any friends. I didn't go to high school with the guys who were sources for all my competitors. Thank you, I've had a very nice life. I never went hungry, my clothes were always clean, and I got to hang out with some of the best people on the planet. That is not a sad fate. You could have that fate. I'm going to show you how to get started, okay? Now, what I'm going to tell you is contained in a free book. You can download this book for free. All you have to do is look it up. It's called Story-Based Inquiry. Okay? It's available in French. Moi aussi, je parle français. Y a quelqu'un ici qui parle français? Ah, génial. Okay. So that was the hardest part of working in France. I had to learn French. Okay. So I'm going to give you a basic rundown on the book and on the method, and I want to tell you a couple of things about investigative journalism in general. Now, when I started, it was right after Watergate, and nobody knew what they were doing. I mean, really, we were making it up as we went along. You can't imagine the silly mistakes we made, sometimes the dangerous mistakes. By the way, most of the danger is psychological, okay? I covered the extreme right in France. I went after ministers. I went after billionaires. I went after a lot of people who were objectively more powerful than myself and who had a lot of support that I didn't have, okay? And the dangers that I had to deal with were psychological. The stress of wondering, do I have it right? The stress of having to find things. Okay. Now, at a certain point, I said to myself, perhaps I could reduce all this stress and become more effective if I started actually looking at how methods work. Okay. So I did a doctoral thesis on it and started thinking about how this stuff works. Okay. And in the process, I made a couple of discoveries. That's what the previous author of the leading investigative method in France compared an investigative journalist to. He said, the method of the snail. You're supposed to go around very slow, okay? Well, the obvious problem with that is life is short, okay? The only resource you never get back is time. If you're moving like a snail, you never get anything done. This is bullshit, shall we say the word. The second myth is that you never know if you'll get a story at the end. This is insane. Okay? How can you possibly get started if you don't know what a story is? Here, let me propose a deal to you. Okay? You're going to spend the next 6 months of your life working on something about which you're totally confused, and then you're going to have to bring in a result. Are you happy? Would you take that deal? You'd take that deal? Then you're a fool. The third part is that investigative journalism costs a lot of money. Well, compared to what? Okay, it's true that if you're setting up a nonprofit center that's going to be focused on corruption, it will cost you some money to do it. But nobody ever talks about the money you make from investigation. Okay, investigation is an investment. It's an investment in your skill set and your career. If you know how to investigate, I can guarantee you that you are never out of a job. There is always somebody who needs you because there's always somebody who needs to know what happened. Most journalists can't find out what happened, except they call somebody up and say, "What happened?" An investigator walks into the room and says, "This is what happened, right?" That's a very different question to ask. And it's a very more powerful question. And when you can ask that question, suddenly you begin to see returns on investment. So please, at different points in your career, someone is going to say to you, "Oh, you shouldn't investigate. It's slow and it's uncertain and it's very expensive." Okay, let the idiots believe that. Go out and have some fun. Okay? Now, a couple of things to get straight here. We are not talking about finding information. Okay? Investigation is not about finding information. I would like to prove this to you. Can I have a volunteer? Would somebody like to volunteer? Oh, thank you so much, mademoiselle. What's your name? God. God? Oh my God, I'm interrogating God. God, do you have an address book on your computer? A contact list? You don't have a contact list in your email or anything like that? Ah, okay, I think you do too. Okay. Is your English okay? Can you do this? Okay. Can I have somebody here who's got a contact list on their computer? Anyone? Thank you. Okay. Do you use that contact list? Okay, so you can tell me the first 5 names on your contact list, right? You remember the first 5 names? No. You don't? Ah, but you can look it up. So you don't remember their phone numbers either. But if I showed you those names, could you tell me how you met them?
I hope most of them.
Yeah, probably you could. That's the difference between a story and information. You can tell me a story about those people, but you can't remember their phone numbers. If you could, you wouldn't need phone directories or a contact list. Okay? So we're not in the business of finding information. We're in the business of finding stories. Of course, we have to get a lot of information, which is why sometimes, if you're not paying attention, you're going to end up like this poor woman. Does your desk look like that, Angela? Angela, you're going to learn something from me too. How flattering, an expert like you, and I have something of value for you. I'm very happy about that. Okay. So the second problem is not the one that most journalists think about. Who can I call? Well, have you ever been in a newsroom and somebody gets an assignment, and what's the first thing they do? They say, "Who can I call?" They pick up the phone. Well, what are you going to say when you get someone on the other end of the phone? Will you say, "What happened?" This is the monkey with the telephone. The monkey with the telephone is about 90% of journalists 90% of the time. The monkey with the telephone is calling somebody up to say, "What happened?" And that person is lying to them more or less. He can afford to lie because the monkey with the telephone has no idea what happened. If you had an idea, you wouldn't say, "What happened?" So our problem is not to get information. It's to organize the information we get by figuring out what happened. Oh, that poses a problem. How can you figure out what happened before you have the information? Anybody have an idea? Is there any way to figure out what happened before you know all the information? No? Wow. I want to work with you. Yes. And our theory is, what do we want to prove? What do we think happened? You never start from zero, you know. Sometimes you're walking down the street and you see something has changed on the street. You ever hear of Chris de Stoop from Knack? You should know Chris de Stoop's name. He's one of the best folks. This guy is a monster. He's so good. Chris was walking down the street in Brussels one day on his way to work, and he suddenly noticed that all the prostitutes had changed color. The day before they were white. Suddenly they were all black. What do you think happened? What happened? One day they're all white, the next day they're all black. What happened? I'm asking you, what do you think happened? Yes? Maybe a what? Maybe they arrested all the white prostitutes.
Maybe they just arrested a lot of prostitutes
And they all ran away and black women showed up to take their place. Okay, so let me tell you something about the kind of theories you have when you're an investigator, okay? Generally, the simplest possible theory is the best. So if there's a razzia, a lot of things have to have happened. The cops had to show up, they had to catch the girls, etc. I think you would have heard about that even before you went to work in the morning. So that theory sounds a little complicated. What else could have happened? Yeah. Maybe the black women do better in that area. Okay. So they just all showed up and said to the white chicks, move on? You think that's what happened? Now you notice something that's happening as we're playing with this idea. We're not just thinking of an explanation, we're thinking of a sequence of events. That's going to come up later in this discussion. What do you think? They're cheaper. For whom? Ah, okay, so the customers got together and decided we're going to bring in some cheaper chicks. Is that it? Pardon me? Pimps! Ah, now this is starting to get interesting. So someone brought the women there. Ah, they're imported from poor countries. This is getting more and more interesting. Who imports them? Very interesting, except that's not what the police say. I talked to the police. I worked on this story too. That's not what the police said. The police said, well, they came here to make money. So overnight, the white prostitutes of Brussels decided they didn't want to make money anymore, and black prostitutes took their place. Bullshit. Pimps brought them there, and Chris set out to prove it. He only had one advantage, which is he knew what he was trying to prove. Okay? That's the fight, folks. You figure out what you're trying to prove, and you see if it fits the facts at your disposition. And this is called a hypothesis. It is astonishing that hypothetical thinking did not become a principle of investigative reporting sooner, because it is used in virtually every branch of the sciences, business consulting, and police work. Cops make theories to explain the facts at a crime scene. Journalists do too, but they don't want to admit they're doing it because that's not objective. You're supposed to find the facts without really saying, oh, this must be what it was. Well, that's nonsense. There's nothing wrong with trying to decide what happened, with having a theory about it, as long as you set out to prove or disprove the theory. Now take a look at what a hypothesis is. This is not my definition. I got it from the Oxford Dictionary. It's a provisional explanation that takes into account the facts at your disposition. Oh my God. What are we going to do if it turns out to be wrong? What can we do with a hypothesis that new facts invalidate? What can we do with that? What? Change it? Yeah, why not? It's just a hypothesis. It's not like changing your face or your personality. It's very easy to change a hypothesis. You say, well, that one's wrong, and then you make another one. Sometimes you end up in the opposite place from where you started, but that doesn't matter because usually the story you find by verifying a hypothesis is better than the story you imagined in the first place. This is one of the amazing things about being a journalist. Reality goes beyond what you could imagine. Okay? So, now we're going to do a little exercise. I did this when I was working on the National Front in France. You know the National Front, Jean-Marie Le Pen's party. At the time, it was Jean-Marie Le Pen. So I'm riding in a car with a National Front official, and he said, you know, we have this program called the National Preference. The National Preference meant that French people had more rights than people who aren't French. In the European Union, that is illegal. It's also illegal in France. And I said, well, that's illegal. And he said, yes, but we brainstormed about it, and we realized that the law didn't say everything. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. What didn't the law say? And he shut up. So what we're going to do is make a hypothesis about what they are up to. What do you think these guys are doing? Here are the facts we know. 1, their program is illegal. 2, they brainstormed about it. 3, they saw some things they could do. What is your hypothesis? What's going on now? Yes? Not yet. Not yet. You're getting ahead of yourself. First, we decide what we're going to try to prove, and then we see what the sources are. You're thinking in the right direction, but you're going just a little too fast. Take the time to go slow when you start, because believe me, you're going to make up that time in the end. Okay? Every 5 minutes you spend doing this saves you 5 hours. I'm going to show you some other time-saving procedures as well. Okay, but let's think about what happened. What do we think is going on? They had a program. Program was illegal. They brainstormed. The law doesn't say everything. So what are they going to do?
Going to try to make their whatever they're trying to do legal?
Yeah. They're going to try to find a way to do what they want to do. Yeah. That's exactly what they're going to do. That's what we think they're going to do. Okay? That's exactly what we think. Now we have to prove it. So how are we going to prove it? And please don't say, who can we call? Okay? No monkey with a telephone, okay? What can we do before we pick up the phone? Because when we pick up the phone or when we go to talk to someone, we want to be in a position to say, this is what happened, right? And they may say, no, that's not what happened. And then we'll say, great, what happened? But at least they will know that we've been thinking about it. They'll know that we're not like the monkey with the telephone. Okay? It's about power, folks. Your personal power is being different. Is showing someone that you're on the case, that they have to play straight with you because you're going to find it. You don't need them to give you everything, like the monkey with the telephone. So, what do you think about the law?
I would search up a law that's supposedly legal.
Okay.
Violating their program.
But is that the first thing you're going to do? What's the easiest thing you can do first?
Looking up what is exactly illegal about the program.
Okay, you're almost there. You're almost there. But actually, excuse me, I'm not being fair to you, okay, because you're speaking my native language, okay, and what you are saying is we're going to look at the program. The program is an open source. An open source. They can't stop us from getting it. We're in the shadows when we get it. They don't hear us coming. We have all the time we need to look at that program and see what's happening with it. And then we can check the law. Then we can go, if we need to, speak to a legal expert and say, I think they're going to do this, 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 and this. How can they do that? In fact, I did that with a legal expert. And what he said to me was, I'm not going to help the National Front. He said, you want to help the fascists figure out how to break the law? I said, no, they've already broken the law. We have to try and catch up with them. I had to say it 3 times before he figured it out, but then he told me what I wanted. Okay. So this is Paul Newman in a detective movie called Harper, which nobody ever sees anymore. I don't know what happened to this movie. There's a scene in this movie that I really love. Harper is the detective, and there are young, admiring people around him because he can find anything. And this young guy comes up with Harper to a door, and he says, Harper, can I go through the door? And Harper says, sure, kid, go through the door. So the kid throws himself against the door and breaks his shoulder. Harper walks over to the door, turns the knob, and steps inside. Okay? A lot of people break their shoulders instead of just turning the doorknob. Okay, so we're going to look for the open doors. The National Front program is an open door. It's just waiting for us to turn the knob and look inside it. The French legal code is an open door. Nobody can stop us from getting it. So we do the open door stuff first. Now let me tell you, okay, you guys are starting out. So let me put you on guard against a very common mistake. Everyone, not everyone, but I taught people your age for many years. And in every class, there was someone who had a secret source. He must have watched the Watergate movie, All the President's Men. He had a deep throat. Wow, someone who could tell him everything. You've met these guys too, right? People with this illusion. I'm going to get a criminal to tell me everything about his business. Yeah, give me a break. So they want people to tell them secrets, and nobody's going to tell you their secrets. If they tell you a secret, it's because they're lying to you. Because they can. It's fun to lie to somebody who doesn't know any better. So what you do is you get the open source stuff first. You see if it supports your hypothesis or not. If it doesn't support your hypothesis, change the hypothesis right away. Okay? And then you move on from there. Okay? Whoops. Okay. Now here's another key tool. And by the way, this is one that Miranda's using at OCCRP. I confirmed it with her. I don't know if you do it too. But you make a chronology. You set up a sequence of steps. Now you can imagine the chronology. Okay? Here we have a chronology that's in front of us. Okay? With this story with the National Front. Okay? So the first step in the chronology is they make a program. What's the second step? Yeah.
They realized it was legal.
They brainstormed and figured out how they could get away with it. And what's the third step?
They'll try and make it legal.
They'll try and make it legal, and they'll try and do it. Which means that at every step of that chronology, there's something we can check. We've already checked the program. We've already checked the law. Now we're ready to see if they're doing it. Okay? I went to the cities. I had a list of the stuff they could do. And at a certain point, I just started, I'd talk to their opponents and say, have you seen them doing this? Have you seen them doing that? And then at a certain point, I just went to see the guys in the National Front. And I said, are you doing this? Are you doing this? Are you doing this? And in one city hall, a guy said to me, well, you left out this and this and this. Why do you think he told me that? Why do you think he told me that? Why would he tell me this? What do you think? Yes? It's close enough, yeah. I'm somebody who's interesting to talk to. I can appreciate what a genius this guy is. He's come up with a clever scheme, and I can appreciate it. I'm not just saying, I'm saying, did you do this? And he's saying, yeah, but I'm even better than you imagined. Okay? You can have these things, and there's something else that'll happen as well. Okay, something that's much more troubling and interesting. Have you ever seen the movie Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts? There's a scene in that movie. Julia Roberts plays an investigator, okay, a legal investigator. But honestly, the way she investigates is just amazing. It's really great. And there's a scene in a bar where a guy comes up to her and says, I know that I can tell you everything. So she's Julia Roberts. She's thinking, he's hitting on me. You know, he's trying to pick me up. My God. And he says, I have all the documents that you've been looking for. Now, I want to tell you something. That is real life. That has happened to me. It's happened to other investigators. At some point, someone comes up to you and says, I've been watching you. You're the one. And they give you what you need. But they won't do it for the monkey with a telephone. They'll do it when you're in the pocket, when you're in their lives, when you know what's happening and you're ready to understand it. And then they give you what you need. Okay? Deep throat doesn't come up and solve it for you. Now, a chronology is going to help you get to that point. What you do is this. It's really simple, guys. You set out the events in the order they must have happened. That tells you what you're going to check. We're going to check the program. We're going to check this. We're going to check what they did. It tells you what you're looking for, because the documents that we need at each step follow the same sequence. And then, when you prove the events, you have the backbone of your story, because the simplest narrative structure is a chronology. It's the one that Aristotle found in 350 BC. It still works. Okay, there's a few twists you can put in it. And by the way, if you read the free manual, free, I don't get royalties, story-based inquiry, it will show you how to play with these narrative principles, okay? And a chronology. But what we're going to do is, pardon me, slick, huh? We're going to make something I call a master file. That's a cute name. What it really was for me was a lifesaver, because I was working on a book and I had enough material to die under. I felt like I'd been hit by an avalanche, and I had to organize the material. So I started making a chronology. And then the chronology started talking to me. It started saying to me, well, what about this? What? This. Well, what's this? It's a hole in your chronology. What's in the hole? So I started filling the holes. And then the chronology said to me, how do you know this happened? So I put in the source material. And then it said to me, what does it mean? So I started making notes in the chronology that told me the meaning of what I was finding. And as I was doing this, I was getting rid of a fundamental source of wasted time in investigations. Because what I was taught to do is do your research and then figure out what the story is. That's the honest way to do it. Well, it's also a very slow way to do it. In fact, if you're organizing the material as you go along, you're already writing the story, because the hardest part of writing any story is the structure. Do you follow me? Do you see what I'm saying? Can you see? We're setting the material in order. We're putting the events, plus the source, plus whatever idea it gives us, which means that we've got a chronological sequence where all of the material we need to write the final story is under our eyes. Okay? It makes things go a lot faster. Whoops. Keep making that mistake. So we've got the event. The source of our information could be an interview, could be a document. We put in the citation, so when we get it in front of the lawyers are able to see within 30 seconds the source of anything. We have the notation. We pull out the document. Here it is, Mr. Lawyer. Makes lawyers really happy. They sit there and look at this and they say, let them sue us. I will kill them. I will eat their meat in front of the judge. Makes them very happy. You want your lawyer to feel happy. Okay. So we have the source material. We put in extracts. I just take extracts out of documents. Sometimes I plug in the whole document. Sometimes I put in a hyperlink to a document on my hard drive or on the internet. Okay? And then the meaning. I just make a little note, N-O-T-E with 2 points. Okay? Because it doesn't occur in the dictionary like that, so I can search my database. By the way, I put in the dates as well, so I can search for what happened in a particular month, a particular day, or a particular year. So all of this information is under my control. And by the way, later in your career, if you start doing this, what this means is that you will be creating a database of every story you ever worked on, and that database will enable you to make a living, because databases have enormous value, and you can make your own. They're doing this at Der Spiegel now. Okay. Final tool, and OCCRP has developed software to do this. I used to do this by hand. Now they have visual investigative scenarios. Please note that, visual investigative scenarios, which enables you to draw a map of all the people implicated in a story so that you can just see what the relationships are between the people. And you can also look at this map as a guide to who you're going to talk to. Let me ask something. Did anybody here ever grow up in a village? I did. Anybody grow up in a village here? You did? What's it like living in a village? Boring? Ah, but now you've escaped. I'm so happy for you. What was especially boring about it?
There was nothing to do. It were all people, nothing for young people.
I see. Were the old people watching you? Did they know everything you did? Now you look embarrassed. Well, let me tell you, in my village, they knew everything I did. So they know in your village, too. So what that... Stories go around really quick. Oh, I know what you're talking about, sister. Okay. So this is the village for the extreme right story we were just talking about. Now, what this means is that when I walk into the village with my heavy shoes and I start saying, this is what happened, right? Everybody's going to know I'm there very fast. They'll say, oh, did you see that guy with the weird accent? An American from Paris? Jesus, what's he doing here? He's asking all these questions. What's he looking for? They're all going to know I'm there, and they all do. They always do. So I need to pick the house where people are going to be happy to see me and where I can talk to the people. And then, once I've talked to them, everybody else in the village is going to be jealous, and they're going to want to talk to me too. Have you talked to the American yet? No, he hasn't been to see me. I wonder why. So who do we start with? Take a look. We have the parents of students in schools. National Front loves schools. The extreme right always loves schools. They think it's the future. They may be right. The opposition, immigrants, citizen groups, prosecutors, city employees. Who's going to want to talk to us first when we come in and say, this is what's happening, isn't it? Who do you think is going to talk to us first? Who? Yes. Yeah. That's a good choice.
People that want to also look at the story things and bring it out.
Yes, the victims. Usually the first people you talk to in an investigation are the victims. Now, I talked to you about the psychological dangers of doing an investigation. Keep this in mind, okay? It probably hasn't happened to you yet, but it's going to happen to you. You're going to be working on a story, and you're going to be talking to a lot of unhappy people. I'm sure that Mary Beth is going to have something to say to you about that. You're going to be talking to a lot of people who feel like they've been screwed. And hanging out with them is not a day at the beach. It's not party time. Okay? You have to think about this, and you have to have somebody to work with or somebody to listen to you who doesn't think that you're going crazy. Okay? Because there are a lot of people in journalism who never did an investigation in their lives. And when you show up and say, you know what I've been finding, they're going to say, oh, aren't you getting a little extreme? Maybe you're losing your balance. No. Maybe you're looking at something that's very ugly. And it takes a little time to adjust to it and get your feelings around it. So, you know, be prepared for that. You talk first to the victims, and victims are unhappy by definition, or they would not talk to you. Okay? It's all right. You'll get used to it. But figure out how to deal with it. Okay. Anything else that we have to say here? Yes. Free resources. Free. And now we have 10 minutes left for any questions. Do we have 10 minutes left? Good. 10 minutes left for questions about this. Okay, that's the website where you get the stuff. Those 2 books are free. Let me tell you something. The Global Investigative Journalism Casebook contains 24 investigative stories from the Global Investigative Journalism Network, of which I am proud to be a founding member and which has incredible people in it, including Angela and her colleagues. Okay? We took 24 stories that were published by the members of this network for the last 10 years. Not only did they give us the stories, well, actually, we paid them for the stories. We pay for work. But not only did they give us the stories, but they wrote afterwards telling us how they got the stories. There is more current tradecraft in this book than in any other book, and it's free. Okay? You can invest the time to read this book. It's not a waste. The other one is the Story-Based Inquiry Manual, which will give you much more detail and development on the stuff I just set out for you. Okay? It's pretty much, I can safely say, without bragging too much, that this is the world standard text right now. It's been translated into 8 languages and growing. It's transcultural. It does not talk about specific information sources. It tells you how to do in greater detail what I've been talking about now. Okay, that's all I have to say. Questions?
First of all. Thank you. Questions for Mark Lee Hunter? You have time. Nobody. Yes.
Yeah, it's not always easy to get your information, and even if you get it, it's not easy to get publicized, because in a recent documentary about the NSA leaks, the New York Times, I think it was the New York Times, was asked by the Bush administration to not publicize it, and even the journalist wasn't happy. And even in America, a lot of news organizations are tied to companies, political parties, so
yes,
it isn't
wait,
in their
but
interest.
listen. First, at the level we're at in this room, that's not going to be a problem for a while. The skills that are needed to do investigation at the top level of a society, and I can say this because I was fucking with tough, powerful people in France. Okay, I was in the face of the ruling class there. The skills you need to do that work are not fundamentally different from the skills you need in the first village you walk into. Okay? Before you start thinking about taking on the national security state, you think about learning how to do the job. Okay? I'm not going to walk onto a tennis court with Roger Federer the first time I hit a tennis ball. Okay? I'm not going to audition for Jimmy Page before I learn how to play the guitar. Okay? It's exactly the same thing. Every time you get a piece of information that nobody gave you, every time you walk in the room and say, this is what happened, right? Look at this. This is what I found. This is what happened, right? You are building your skills for the day when you'll come up against somebody tough. Okay? And I want to tell you, all right, the current fights with the national security state, you know, the fact that the major media lay down on the job, that they caved in, that they let themselves be overrun, this isn't the first time. And it won't be the last time, but in between there's going to be some victories. Okay? I've been doing this for 40 years now. Okay? I've seen some defeats and I've seen some victories. And the victories, you know, you can't believe it. I've seen my colleagues take down governments. I saw one of my colleagues take down the government in France. That wasn't easy. Okay? It can be done, even when you think you're alone. But that gets us into another subject, which is how you build a constituency for your work. Okay? And that's more and more important now. We have to be thinking about allying with other social forces. And Robert Miraldi referred to the journalism of outrage. That is the title of one of the most important books in the history of journalism studies, which shows how reporters build coalitions in order to prevail. We have to be thinking about this. We are not lone riders on the plane with a 6-gun and a badge. Okay, we're in a gang fight, and you've got to find your gang. Okay, when you get at that level. But not in the beginning, it won't be an issue.
But my second question was, the interest of a news organization is often tied with political interests. So
Stop. First of all, our only market is not news organizations. That's 19th century thinking. Sorry, friend. Okay, we are not just working with news organizations now. We are working with NGOs like Greenpeace. We are working with entrepreneurial startups of our own. Look at what Edwy Plenel did in France with Mediapart. Okay? Mediapart is a daily investigative newspaper. Okay? And Plenel is making money. People say, no one will pay for content on the internet. Well, wrong. If you give them something that nobody else is giving them and they need it, they will pay. Okay? It's being proved now. And investigative journalism is a commercial asset in this fight for survival. The publishers who refuse it are the same publishers who are watching their audience numbers go down every year, and they haven't figured it out yet. What is the matter with these people? I mean, well, I can tell you one thing, okay? I've been working in a business school doing investigations paid for by a business school for many years now. And in that period, I saw exactly 2 managers from the news business come through the school. I'm not saying we're the best business school on the planet. We're one of the best. But, you know, all the same, this is amazing. People in every other business are studying how to make money, how to be a success. And nobody's coming through INSEAD to figure out how to keep their business alive when they're in the media? Duh. What? Did I hear that right? Yes, it's true. My goodness. Anyway, so that's my answer to that, okay? Don't take the word of what the people running declining media think is worthwhile and marketable. These guys are ruining their businesses, and one of the reasons is that they gave up on being the public's watchdog. They left it to NGOs. They left it to idiots with blogs. They left it to anybody but themselves, and they're losing their franchises and their licenses to operate as a consequence. And they're opening ground for ferocious new competition. It's a huge mistake from a business strategy standpoint. Okay.
Anybody else have a question before you? Okay. Yes. You sure?
Yeah, sure.
For him. I want to hear your question first.
Oh, but I don't have.
Mark, you seem to be a quite confident guy, quite combative and militant, engaged, passionate. But what's your advice when you talk to future journalists? I'm not even talking about investigative journalism. When you know in Belgium, such a small country, 2-3 languages, we hardly have 10 investigative journalists. What if one of those want to be an investigative reporter?
Okay,
What's the engine? Because I sometimes wonder, what's the agenda you have?
Okay, first, I never did just investigative journalism. Some projects take longer than others, okay? I always had a half dozen things I was working on. Some of them were just for fun. For many years, I earned part of my living and a lot of my fun by being a rock and roll critic. Okay? I mean, I was in clubs every night. Somebody else was paying for my entertainment. I paid for my drinks. Okay? But somebody was letting me in the door to listen to bands, and I helped the bands. I did it from an investigative standpoint. I looked for talents that nobody was talking about. That made me a reputation, and it made me welcome. Okay? And the hardcore investigative stuff, you know, you do it as opportunity comes up. You do it as the stories come to you. Okay? And I began teaching in 1986, which not only got me into the French Social Security system, but it got me access to libraries. Libraries are hugely important. I work at INSEAD now. We have one of the best business libraries in the world. Okay, anything I want to know about a business, I can get it. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? You think of how to structure your life to support what you love. You don't say, can I make a living doing what I love? Man, why would you want to make a living doing anything else? You know, why would you want to make a living doing something you hate? Something that bores you. That's why you left home, right? Because you were bored. Why do you want to make a living doing something you don't like? You figure out how to support what you care about. When you look at it from that perspective, you take responsibility and power over your own existence. And you're having more fun. You know, almost every investigative reporter I know has activities that they find agreeable, that enable them to bring in income, and that support the investigative work, which is their passion. And like that, they can continue. You know, and the longer you continue, the better you get.
How to survive in the markets? How to survive as a watchdog?
Very easy, Thomas. In principle, it's very easy. You look for people who need something, and you satisfy that need. You go where you're needed. When you go where you're needed, it solves a big psychological problem, which is, am I worth anything? Okay, some people have that naturally. Okay, some people don't. I don't think I did. You know, I went to work in areas where I saw that something important was happening that nobody was paying attention to. And when I showed up, the people said, wow, finally somebody's paying attention. Yes, I am. Educate me. And I'd ask good questions to show them that I was learning as we went along. But when you show up and you're paying attention, okay, you suddenly become necessary to a community of people. That's the first part of the answer. And they won't let you die. They won't let you disappear. They need you. The second thing is that if you look at how the industry is becoming structured now, you see that we are looking at a community-based structuration of investigative media. Okay, Greenpeace is doing it in the environmental scene. Okay, there was a guy in France who did it for people who were affected by the crisis. He created a website that was about verifying everything you can get for free. What a great idea. He made people's lives better. Okay, somebody just did it in Paris with a thing called La Tribune des Arts. You know, he's the only guy who's publishing real independent news in that sector. Everybody else is bought. The journal Prescrire was founded by a guy from Médecins Sans Frontières. And they're talking about the impact of pharmaceuticals on patient populations. They're the only people in France who are giving real information on that. There are other examples all over the place, but what you do is look for a need that is not being met, and you move in and you own it on the principle that most of your competitors are not going to make the effort. They're going to be monkeys with telephones.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there.
We'll talk more about it
Yeah,
later.
you thought.